Bringing up the term live service is bound to grate the ears of every gamer you mention it to. They're specifically engineered by huge companies with no morals or regard for creativity to extract as much money from you as possible. Psychological manipulation, social pressure, and your own human behaviors are being used to create a hostile space that preys on you for cash instead of creating a truly fun or creative experience. Live services have changed an entire industry forever. But is it too late to fix this? It's January 2001, and one of your friends from school has just told you about this new game they've been playing, and they're super excited about it. You can do whatever you want. You can fight mythical monsters, craft your own weapons and armor, and the best part is you can play with tens of thousands of other players, including your other buddies in school. That game was RuneScape. RuneScape was a blockbuster when it hit the scene and remains one of the most successful MMOs of all time. In 2021, the game generated £50 million or $63 million in profit. But RuneScape today is way different than it was back in 2001, and viewing the game back in its conception doesn't just inform you on RuneScape's history, but the live service model as well. The game was free to play. Thousands of hours of gameplay in a constantly developing world for absolutely nothing. The game had heart, a soul of creativity that drew people in. Whether you know it or not, people can get a feeling when playing a game, and the passion and creativity RuneScape was built with invoked a perfect example of this feeling. However, just a year later, a subscription model was introduced. $5 from a game that you'd already sunk hundreds of hours in for free. My God, it's highway robbery. This wasn't bad at all, but as time passed, the model caught the eye of much bigger players, and they were going to turn it into a gold mine.
Anything can slow the explosive growth of the intoxicating game called World of Warcraft.
It's very addicting. There's so many things you can do.
Upon release, World of Warcraft brought many other MMOs and the entire industry down, as tons of players flocked to the game. The game was a major hit, and it was a dominating force in the industry that now had a new gold standard to aspire to. The game cost $50 to play and then $15 a month to continue playing. The game was clearly made by those who love the lore and universe, and players felt that. WoW would not have held its place in the industry it did without that feeling. This feeling built a community that spawned incredible friendships, rivalries, and incredible memes. BlizzCon was also created, the convention for the company to show off their latest expansions, and stood as a celebration of the community. People planned their vacations around going to this. Going to BlizzCon was like a holy pilgrimage, and it was worth it to be part of something bigger than yourself. The community aspect to this game can be considered the main aspect that helped make WoW what it was at this time. WoW and RuneScape were live services, even though we didn't have the label yet. New content being churned out was necessary to keep old players and bring in new ones, and their communities are what helped build these two titans into what they would become. But those very same communities had a lot of hidden potential that no one knew about yet. But this potential just needed the right set of morally bankrupt eyes to see it. On July 8th, 2008, a deal was finalized. This merger between Blizzard and an at-the-time sinking ship called Activision. Activision and CEO Bobby Kotick were seen as the grim reapers of the gaming industry. Search up the plethora of former studio acquisitions by the company, and it won't be hard to understand the worry that swept across the WoW community. Legendary point-and-click adventure game maker Sierra Entertainment, who helped pioneer the entire industry, shut down. Red Octane, the studio who pioneered the awesome Guitar Hero games, would see Activision milk the series dry and ultimately ruin the brand, resulting in the studio being shut down. And you'd think Radical Entertainment, the studio who consistently put out the awesome prototype games with massive success for their new sequel, would be safe, right? Well, no. Activision laid off much of their staff and forced them to simply be support for other studios' projects. I mention all of this to show you what type of company has just bought World of Warcraft and Blizzard, and the man in charge of it as well. They don't care about games as we did. Bobby Kotick's own mother said Bobby thought games were a waste of time. And the sad thing is, Bobby is smart. He may not be tapped into the same culture you're in, but he sure knows how to sell products to you within that culture. He and others like him started to wonder how gamers thought. There was no concrete evidence at the time, no surefire way to manipulate yet through a live service. But whether Bobby Kotick knew it or not, he would become one of the pioneering forces behind that manipulation as we see it today. And it all started with one in-game item, the Celestial Steed. No one knew it at the time, but this one item would prove to be one of the most pivotal microtransactions in video game history. But to understand why this one little item is so important, we need to understand what it represents. And to do that, we need to take a quick look at Starcraft II Wings of Liberty, another Activision-owned product now. Starcraft was a legendary series spawning gaming tournaments and had a thriving community. It was one of the biggest franchises in gaming. Starcraft II reportedly had a budget of roughly $100 million and sold about 6 million copies over its lifetime. If that game sold for $60, hypothetically, over that lifetime, they would have made over $300 million. But then something terrible happened.
Yeah, here's the biggest sadness, dude. I worked 2 years of overtime straight on StarCraft II Wings of Liberty. StarCraft II Wings of Liberty made less money than the horse, the first Sparkle Pony horse in World of Warcraft. A $15 microtransaction horse made more money than StarCraft II. That's it. That's the whole meme, dude. You're wondering why these companies do microtransactions? Because dipshits keep buying all of them.
This one event helped spark a revolution in the industry. An entire franchise would die out in service of said revolution, and it all took shape around a question. How do we manipulate more people to buy more virtual ponies? And that one question leads us into the terrifying way in which psychological understanding was turned against us. Firstly, we see the categorization of players developing, exploiting the free-to-play model even more. Players enjoy different aspects of your game, and now games need to have very specific aspects to them to meet all these different needs. This promised players who enjoyed different genres of games, maybe a single-player Mass Effect, COD, etc., that this game here has something for you to enjoy. So now publishers have a better way to bring in more players. Second, taking advantage of players' impatience was also identified as a pivotal aspect to this revolution. Games in the past were grindy, fighting battles to engage with systems to level up in the game. For games like Final Fantasy's early titles, this grind was an intentional choice made by the creators. This choice was aggravating to some, and in many subsequent games afterwards in the series, grinding was either lessened or taken out to improve the player experience. However, if this behavior for impatience and aggravation can be funneled to monetization, you'll see not only more engagement, but a clamor for this system to expand and allow players to skip this part of the game. Waiting mechanics or the design around loot drops are incredible ways to implement this grind. Level skips, resource buying, and even premium currencies are amazing ways to turn an issue in game design to be solved into an insidious tool to be used. However, we can't allow players to get so big so fast that there's no point in playing the game. Artificially inflating playtime was a key balancing act in these new games. Players at times can be very stubborn, but over time, seeing the same ads for a loot box or skin does erode that stubbornness. In 1968, Robert Zając, a Polish sociologist, coined the term mere exposure theory. This states that the mere exposure to something is more likely to drive positive or negative feelings towards that thing simply by being more familiar with them. Ads in-game for loot boxes with no previous experience with them can lead over time to more players engaging with them at some point. And Zając noted that people rated some ads or products more highly simply by being more familiar with them. So simply being made aware of a monetization tool is enough in the publisher's eyes. It makes their moneymaker the go-to for players within their games, the first thing they think of. But one I've spoken about previously is just the tip of the iceberg. Publishers needed a more powerful tool in order to truly unleash this potential, and that tool was found. There was a comparison starting to be made behind the scenes. Luxury goods as an industry was and is booming at the moment. In 2010, after the housing crisis in 2008, and in 2021, after the pandemic, the industry saw explosions as people began going back out and buying up all the things they'd been missing, gaining immediate satisfaction, we could say. Strangely as well, most people didn't really have the money for these things. Many speculate that we judge the ability for individuals to work in their own best interest far too highly. That there's an irrationality behind many of these purchases, that there's a perceived self-esteem value or sense of accomplishment when buying a luxury item. But sadly, this trend doesn't seem to be stopping, as the luxury goods market is expected to continue growing through 2030. So there is a lesson to take here, and the gaming industry wanted to take this kind of lesson and apply it to their games. So the questions they asked were, how do we create this same feeling in our customers? But I think the better question is, how do we instill the culture of luxury goods in our games? And that's where publishers found the tool they needed: the game's own communities. Making sure your game is social with a community is a great way to drive this luxury goods mindset. Groups push others to spend more within the group. If you breed the right culture, you can make a community that is based around in-game items rather than someone's skill in the game itself. This is the feeling publishers were hoping to achieve with the new revolution I spoke about. The Celestial Steed was simply a precursor to a newfound gold rush that very few were in on as of early 2010. Influencers helping to set the culture you want, instilling the correct goals you want your community to have, i.e., buying more in-game items. Peer pressure sets the expectation for the person new to the game, and all this helps drive revenue and engagement with whatever system you want to implement. Different games implement these lessons in different ways, all being reinforced by group dynamics. World of Warcraft implemented level skips, allowing your character to be max level, skipping the entire point of the game. Your friends need a healer. Why not make one and buy a level skip? Fortnite perfectly encapsulates the luxury goods example, with players clamoring and bragging about their own collection. Counter-Strike Go allows players to use these skins in gambling minigames against others, with many an influencer reinforcing this through social expectations. Game design had taken a major step backwards. Instead of how does a player explore a region or how do they become hooked on a game? No. Now the design was basically becoming something akin to a drug deal.
It's a model for how people progress in a game. The hook is what gets you into the game to try out a free-to-play game. Then you build it into a habit that you play multiple sessions every day. And then at the end, it's the hobby phase where people see it as one of their main hobbies, and they put lots of time and resources into it.
For children, there are serious issues about young minds and habit building that occurs. Firstly, the connection between satisfaction and how difficult that satisfaction is to achieve. If I gave you a 5-year plan that could make you $500,000 in return for your hard work, many would take me up on that opportunity, but very few would actually get to the end of that road. If you tell a morbidly obese person in their early 30s that diabetes is a serious risk for them without lifestyle changes, I will tell you from firsthand experience, many of them still indulge and come back later needing to undergo major surgeries. People don't always act rationally and work in their best interests. That's what publishers were betting on. The message here is it's hard for humans to put off immediate satisfaction, and it takes an exceptional person to deny themselves immediate pleasure for a better long-term reward, especially when others are telling and setting the expectations within a community. Inherent in many of us is not a drive to self-reflect or introspect, meaning many of us don't build a foundation of what we think or believe ourselves. For many reasons, we look to others to do the work for us. We look outwards at how others perceive us. Immediate satisfaction can come from a political group you're a part of. If you have the correct ideas and say them at the correct moments, the instant satisfaction that comes from that is addictive and you chase it. And children obviously are an easy target for this type of pressure. Though children can be unknowledgeable about the world, they still see patterns. I do X, I get Y. I land the latest rare Fortnite skin and I get immediate social praise for it. This is the feeling studios are told to focus on, self-worth and self-esteem being tied to monetization. Everything about a live service is scrutinized not through the lens of player enjoyment or quality of life. Instead, monetization is the linchpin of how your game must function, to the point of borderline social engineering. When a casino or state lottery show jackpot winners receiving praise and 15 minutes of fame, others can more vividly picture themselves there. And when an influencer is paid to open a loot box gaining a card a community covets, players start to believe that the investment will eventually pay off. The expectations are being set. So as Bobby Kotick, you see the potential for this model, for companies to make tons and tons of cash. So now it was time to cash in for the very first time. The future of gaming was going a particular direction from here on out. Some call it fate, but Bobby, well, he called it destiny. July 3rd, 2013, and the future of the modern live service was here. Destiny was set to be the shining beacon that the industry would rally around. The thing we didn't know about Destiny was it would be one of the first games to truly apply the lessons we spoke about. It would be the barometer to gauge the response to these new changes. But if you're Bobby Kotick, you ain't worried. We've done our homework. Players love to buy this useless crap. Special editions for the game? Check. We could even add cosmetic microtransactions at some point in the game's life. And social pressure, community building, is ready to go. All we need to do now is just sit back and let the money roll in.
What the hell happened? Was this intentional? How can Destiny, one of the most expensive games of all time, with a whopping $500 million budget, how can it end up missing so many essential elements at release?
Don't you worry, that content will be back with a vengeance and a price tag. Standard Edition is now $50, a new record high for Destiny DLC. But wait, there's another version for $100, and it's got dungeons.
That's it? What the
For a brief moment, we did the right thing. We did the smart thing. We rebelled against everything that was implemented into Destiny 1 and the choices made in the game. Destiny 1 was the first true attempt by a publisher to institute the new order in the gaming industry. Destiny 1 had and did everything that every publisher wanted to do, but it's just failed. Everyone hates the game. To get a brief overview, Destiny 1 promised a compromise between MMO and story-based single-player games that were very popular at the time. Having something for everyone, you could say. The game was deceptive in its marketing, to say the least. No doubt that most likely Bungie and the team wanted and did make awesome substantive content for the game, but Activision must have stepped in to cut that same content out to be resold later. The reason this occurs is because live services are not designed around being satisfying, curated experiences. They revolved around having things for you to do. This leads to much of your time being wasted on repetitive mission designs you got on launch, artificially inflating playtime, you could say. Destiny 1 also designed their loot to be as slow and painful as possible to get, with people resorting to loot caves where they knew enemies spawned. But the thing was, even if you grabbed the engrams out of the cave, it was still a dice roll on what loot you would get. Microtransactions in full would become the main moneymaker for the game in 2015, changing its model late in its lifespan. This could have funneled players to being able to buy gameplay affecting equipment in the game store, but that wasn't in Destiny 1. Until near the end of the game's lifespan in April 2016. All of these things led to the first Destiny dying 3 years later. Nowhere near the timeline, former Bungie Director of Production Jonty Barnes said, quote, "We're going to continuously update the game from now until the end of time." So we really didn't get close to that goal at all. So of course, Destiny became what everyone wanted to avoid and never try to reproduce, right? Wrong. For all the game's shortcomings, for all the hate it received, it was a success. Activision was actually quite happy with Destiny 1, although the game was getting dunked on time and time again for being a lazy time waster. It made money. A massive $500 million investment was poured into the game, with roughly $140 million being spent on actual development costs. And you know why Activision was so happy? Because we got irrational. And in its first week, Destiny made $300 million in a week. And after this, it sets the table for where we are now. Live services are the embodiment of what publishers and investors want the gaming industry to be. Psychologically probing and damning the consequences to many with pre-existing gambling habits and children who will grow up with potentially worse habits. This industry has shown its lack of care for players and their own mental and financial health. They barely even care for their own employees in the same way. Companies like this make their money and need a sacrifice to make their bottom line look better. This is the industry that we're stuck with, and only a few bright spots remain in it to make us remember what video games are about. And though we as people are able to be dissected to our basic parts and behaviors, things always change. The industry has now gotten the culture they wanted, and they will now suffer in it. Many were slow on the uptake to get in on the live service gold rush, and many are now slow on the downward trend of live services. Helldivers 2, one of the lone hits of the genre recently, has none of the hallmarks the game industry wants. And its only similarity, the Battle Pass, has very little impact on the game itself. Helldivers 2 should be the hallmark of how to make a live service game in the future. However, with over 500 studios working on at least one live service game right now, I highly doubt most of them are being made with love, passion, and creativity in mind. But Helldivers 2 showed one thing: that players will still support games with real creativity to them. That even though companies take advantage of our worst behaviors, sometimes we show support to those who truly deserve it. And sometimes, that's all we can do. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Been busy. I was sick for a while, but back on the train, learned how to write better. So hopefully this script came off better to you guys, more of a story to tell you guys. Obviously, much different look to the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below if you're a subscriber and, give me thoughts on the videos and stuff like that. Join the Discord down below in the description. Follow me on Twitter at BradenVoice there. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Already getting it done.